Okay, so we just about finished Siman Reish Pei Vav, which discusses which kind of rooms are obligated mezuzah. So I just wanted to go over a few other points that we did not get to. So one is the halacha that it's only considered a doorway when it's meant to signify a new room. However, there's a concept called achsuki tikra. Let's say you have pillars there, and its purpose is not to convey or to begin a new room, but rather simply to hold up the building. In such a case, it would not be obligated in mezuzah. So where's this common? If you go to Eretz Yisrael, so sometimes they have these underground, I'm talking the parking lot under the building, right? It's open air, but you can kind of enter it. There's kind of these pillars holding it. So since those are not meant to be doorways, but rather they're to hold up the whole building, hopefully. So then in that case, it is not obligated in a new mezuzah, since it's only meant to hold it up. I remember when I was learning by Rabbi Berkowitz, so he discussed a case. If anybody ever been to the Eshet Torah beis medrash in the Old City? So if you notice, they have all these. It's very strange. They have all these pillars, and in the middle of the beis medrash, you have all these pillars. So they had a question when they were redesigning it: should it be obligated mezuzah? So they asked the architect, "What are these pillars doing here?" So he said that he wanted to commemorate the fact that it used to be different rooms. Apparently, there's different rooms, so he wanted to commemorate this special thing. There used to be many rooms. So one time, Rav Yashiv had been there for a bris, and they asked Rav Yashiv, "What do we do here?" So he says, are they going to be separate rooms, or are they going to be one room?" So he said, "Yeah, we're going to plan to make it for, this section will be for this grade, and this section will be that grade." He said, in that case, since it's meant to signify a new room, the start of a new room, so then we don't view it as simply holding up the entire structure, but rather it's starting a new room, and therefore it would become obligated mezuzah. Sometimes you'll have this also. I should add before that. However, if it's there to give a nice look, so sometimes they'll make it like a fancier. Sometimes you'll see in front of a beis medrash, it's holding it up, but they did it in a fancy way. So then it may very well become obligated in a beracha, which would be without a beracha. It may become obligated mezuzah rather, but without a beracha. Sometimes you'll have this. Let's say you have between two rooms, between a living room and a dining room. So you have multiple pillars, right? You ever see that? So there's kind of like 4 doorways. So it's not really 4 doorways, but it's aesthetically. So I've seen people put on 4 different mezuzahs, obviously without a beracha. Which one gets a beracha? I don't know. I guess the one that's most commonly used. But if it's for aesthetic purposes, then it would. Some people say that you should put a beracha. You should put a mezuzah without a beracha. Okay. There's an interesting question. It's not so relevant here, but elevators. Are elevators obligated in mezuzahs? So some people say that on the ground floor level, it is obligated going into the elevator. There's a question about the other floors, but the ground floor level, we would view it as we discussed in the past, a beis sha'ar. A beis sha'ar is basically one room that leads for the purpose to another room. So the entranceway, we would view it as the entranceway to get to whatever floor you need to get to. So being that the case, ideally one should have a mezuzah on the ground floor level at the very least. As for the other floors, again, this is all assuming we're talking about a case where a mezuzah would be put, assuming it's not there's no issues with we're not afraid that non-Jews are going to come defile the mezuzahs. Then some people would put on going into the other way, going into the elevator. Going into the elevator. No, the opposite. Going out of the elevator into the floor. Okay. One interesting halacha is the Mishabura says a fascinating chiddush. He says that we mentioned before that a sukkah is exempt from mezuzah, right? Because a sukkah by the very definition is a diras arai, it's temporary, and therefore it's not obligated. So he says, let's say some people have a sukkah in their house, right? So they kind of a retractable roof, they put schach on top, and that's their mezuzah. So he says, so for those 7 days, it now takes on the status of a diras arai. It is a non-permanent room, and therefore is not obligated mezuzah. So you'll say, okay, great. What's the problem? The problem is what's going to happen after Sukkos. After Sukkos, says the Mishabura, a person, you can't just leave it there because we're going to discuss this later. But there's a concept called taseh v'lo asay. That means that you have to put the mezuzah on, and it can't just be there all along and then become obligated. Meaning, if I have let's say for example, let's say there is no doorway over there, right? So we're going to discuss that there's a requirement that actually has to be mezuzahs, which literally means the side panels, and the mashkuf, which is what's the lentil, thank you. So you need those. So let's say I put a mezuzah on, and then only afterwards I put I fix the side post and the lintel, that would not be obligated. That's called tasav v'lumina asa. You can't put it on before it becomes obligated, right? You have to put it on after it's obligated. So in that case, the Mishnah says that you would have to take it off again, right? You would have to take it off after Sukkos and reaffix it after Sukkos. This is quite a chiddush. Right? For example, we discussed that it's only obligated when somebody's chayiv, when somebody's living there. So let's say one person leaves and another person moves in. So according to this Mishnah Berurah, you would have to take off the mezuzah and then put it on again, which is quite we don't have such a concept. Especially we saw that you're not allowed to take it off. Right? So the first person would have to leave it standing, and then when the next person moves in, he would be required to take it off and then put it back on again. So yeah.
What about an atrium?
An atrium?
Yeah, for example, the door, the entryway on the north side.
Okay.
Coming in. So you have a doorway, you come in, and there's another, basically it's used for, to keep the area warm, for
right.
Summer.
So that would take on the step. Yeah, that's good.
So it's not really a room per se. Nobody's going to live in there. You're not going to store anything
right.
in there. All it is, it's just.
Is an entryway. So that gets to my next point. We discussed, because that was the last point I was going to mention tonight, and then we discussed the 4x4 requirement, right? That it has to be 4x4 amas. So I haven't measured that room over there, but let's suppose that it's not 4x4. So the Chamud Daniel, who's a later posek, he says that we say that it needs 4x4 is only when it's for living quarters. So if it's a bedroom, so if it's less than 4x4, nobody could live in a bedroom like that. However, he said, let's say it's not for living quarters, but for other purposes. So if it's a storage house, or if it's a beis sha'ar, which is an entranceway to the next room, so he says, why should you need 4x4, right? You shouldn't need 4x4 because 4x4 is only a requirement when there's living quarters. And in fact, we do follow this opinion, and therefore, even for it to be less than 4x4, we would still put it in. Now, just to add to this, there's Rabbi Teitelbaum who says a slightly different idea, and he says, not that we don't view it as, he says it's because we view it as an entranceway to the next one. Meaning, even if, forget the Chamud Daniel's rationale, that the 4x4 requirement only applies to living quarters and not non-living quarters. He says, even without that idea, you could still say that since it is a beis sha'ar to the next room, right? So we discussed the booth, which is an entranceway for the next, wherever you're going into. So that would be obligated. So what would be the difference between them? The question is, which way do you put it in? According to the Chamud Daniel, it's inherently obligated, right? And therefore, you would put it into going into that direction, right? Because we're going to discuss.
So you wouldn't put it in, let's say, you wouldn't put it at the entrance, the very first door.
Right, you would put it in the opposite way. Yeah, exactly. But and on the right side going out, right?
No, going in.
No, going out, because according to Chamud Daniel, it takes on a status of its own. Okay, it's a little confusing. We're gonna have to get there. But according to Rabbi Teitelbaum, it's only said that we only view it as a entranceway to the next one, so it would be on the outside door going in. But we're going to discuss these halachos, which side it goes on. But that's another thing to consider. But as for just one last. So getting back to if a person moves out of their house and another person moves in, are they obligated to take it out? So the diras, which is the author of the Sivas, but he also wrote a siddur, which I have right over here. So he writes that there's a fundamental difference between the case of the Sukkah and when somebody moves out. In the case of the Sukkah, the structure was changed, right? The actual structure, the status of the room changed. It's changed from a diras to diras arai, from a permanent residence to a non-permanent residence, and therefore, then we would say that it's a problem. However, in the case of the apartment, one person moves in, one person out, so since the status of the apartment didn't change, right? It's the same exact apartment, it's simply that person moved out, therefore, the next person would not be obligated to remove it. We would not say tasav v'lumina asui. That probably would not apply in that case. But again, just something to consider for all those who have.
Yeah, but isn't that only true if you know that the person coming in is Jewish? If you don't know who's coming in after you, then aren't you obligated to remove your mitzvah?
Yes. If somebody, again, we're talking about, let's say in Eretz Yisrael, for example, when it's most common that the next person is going to be Jewish. So does the next person have to does that have to take it off and on again?
Is the dormitory like that? You're renting the dorm room?
So dormitory, there's a discussion, what status, because we discussed the idea that a rental, right? Rental is, in Eretz Yisrael, is obligated right away, and in Chutz La'aretz, and outside of Eretz Yisrael, it's only obligated after 30 days, although we discussed even that's not so simple, now the days that we sign contracts. So they discuss a dormitory. I think they say that a dormitory belongs to the yeshiva, and the yeshiva is the one who puts it up right away. They say the same thing with a hospital. So you have a hospital in Eretz Yisrael. You're not really renting the hospital, right? You're paying for service at the hospital, and it belongs to them. So they put up the. It's not like you're asking that each person who goes in, right? According to what he's asking a question. All right, one guy goes in the hospital. Okay, next guy, you might have to put a new one. So obviously we don't say that. We view it as belonging to the hospital, and then everybody could use it.